Hello and welcome to Devtoberfest. This is week 2 of the months-long event. You are at Data and Analytics track, and the first session of the second week is about bidirectional connectivity between SAP Analytics Cloud and Data Warehousing Cloud for planning. If you are just joining our track for the very first time, then please be informed that the October 5th, last week, we had sessions about embedded machine learning in SAP HANA Cloud and Data Warehousing Cloud. Today we have two great sessions, one that you are participating in right now, and the other one about building analytic applications with SAC. The next week is going to be about more about Data Warehousing Cloud, and the last Wednesday of this month will be about data intelligence. You can find all these sessions, the descriptions, the presenters' information on the web page. I'm going to paste this into the chat of this YouTube stream. And as well, I would like to remind all of you who are participating in the Devtoberfest contest that you can get points for participating in this session either live or watching this by answering some simple questions. And these questions are available on the web page that I'm going to share in the form of the that I'm going to share in chat as well. This validation question is available in the description of the video on YouTube. This validation question is available as well on the web page of this session. And with that, let me just remind, my name is Vitaly Rudnitsky. I'm one of the developer advocates who are organizing this Devtoberfest together with the product experts from different SAP organizations, and I would like to hand this over to our today's speakers.
Thank you very much, Vitaly, for the introduction, and actually also for inviting us to Devtoberfest. So we're very excited to be here today, and specifically to present the topic of bidirectional integration between SAP Analytics Cloud and SAP Data Warehouse Cloud. Next slide, Max, maybe. And of course, we'll also show some roadmap today. So that's why we see here a legal disclaimer, but for the most part of what you'll see here today, it's actually already in the system and you can freely try it out. We are here not alone, but I have two colleagues with me. So first of all, my name is Mirko Link. I'm a product manager for SAP Data Warehouse Cloud. And with me, I have my counterpart, so to say, on the SAP Analytics Cloud side, namely Max Gander, who's also a product manager and with whom I work closely together to actually make that topic happen. And Jean Fradel is a developer on SAP Analytics Cloud side. He developed one service that we're going to see later, and as well as a demo. And that's also how we want to run that session today. So first of all, I want to give you an introduction into data warehousing, into analytics, and basically the SAP solution portfolio. Before then, we'll see two demos. One demo from Jean, who developed basically one data export service on SAP Analytics Cloud side. And then lastly, we'll also see Max, who will actually show how that export service from SAC works together with SAP Data Warehouse Cloud to make that bidirectional integration happening. Now, first, to set a bit the context, I want to just get back to the SAP Business Technology Platform, which is actually our platform to power the intelligent enterprise. And this business technology platform includes database, data management solutions, analytics, application development, as well as integration from on-premise in the end to the cloud. And overall, what we can say and what holds true specifically for data and analytics is that all those technologies, they provide already substantial value individually, data warehousing, analytics. But overall, where we see the real power, and basically today, our session, I think, is a prime example for that, is that the technologies play even better together if they are used in combination with each other. And that's specifically the case if our customers want to harness the power of data and analytics, where we have basically SAP HANA Cloud that's powering everything with its in-memory capabilities, over to the SAP Data Warehouse Cloud with extensive modeling capabilities also for the business user, and then over to SAP Analytics Cloud. And that's in the end our strategy, to connect these different pieces and provide one unified experience for the end user. Now, if you want to look a bit deeper into this so-called engine room of our data and analytics services, and here we see basically the different aspects, so database, business semantics, and analytics and planning. And from an end user perspective, of course, you can then consume the analytics in one of our LOB applications. So, for example, SAP Analytics Cloud is integrated into SuccessFactors S/4HANA, as well as in a standalone manner, right? If you want to do planning or analytics. And then I think what's specifically interesting also for today is the interplay between SAP Analytics Cloud and SAP Data Warehouse Cloud, where I'll also come back to in a second. Now, overall, what we can say when you basically want to retrieve value out of our solutions, we see that usually in a circular workflow. And that's what we will try to picture here a bit. So everything starts with data integration, where you need the connectivity options to get the data in from diverse source systems over to data storage, data cataloging, actually something that we want to also enhance with a new innovation coming in early next year. And then really the game of SAP Data Warehouse Cloud, where we have data preparation capabilities, data modeling capabilities, both for IT in the so-called data layer modeling, as well as for business with semantics and business semantics modeling. And then it goes over to sharing, how to share data with each other once you have your data sets, and then use SAP Analytics Cloud on top of it in a seamless manner. And that's actually also where we did quite a bit of progress in the past. When we look at the next slide and our strategy to effectively make SAC and DWC, the abbreviations for SAP Analytics Cloud and SAP Data Warehouse Cloud, grow together. So what we can also say for today, and if you look at the leftmost diagram, we have SAP Analytics Cloud sitting on top of SAP Data Warehouse Cloud. And it has, when it comes to analytics, a live data connection, meaning all data where you want to report in can remain in SAP Data Warehouse Cloud and with its security and without a redundant data replication. And SAP Analytics Cloud, in turn, can effectively take advantage of the models of Data Warehouse Cloud, also from a semantical perspective. So when it comes to language or translation capabilities, when it comes to time dimensions, when it comes to hierarchies, when it comes to data access controls, all these capabilities do not need to be re-implemented again. They are simply reused from SAP Data Warehouse Cloud. And actually similar things we want to achieve with SAP Analytics Cloud when it comes to planning. So we want to establish Data Warehouse Cloud as the enterprise planning foundation that basically hosts, for example, SAC planning models. And we did that first milestone in Q2 and Q3 this year by effectively releasing 2 APIs on SAC, on DWC side, that let the two solutions effectively integrate with each other and transfer data, something I'll come back to actually in a second, because it's also the topic for today. Now, looking a bit into the future, there is, of course, the two pillars, analytics and planning. For Q1 next year, we will actually introduce a new model type in SAP Data Warehouse Cloud called to or referred to as the analytic model. And this one actually brings many benefits. On the one side for modeling in Data Warehouse Cloud, on the other side also for the consumption in SAP Analytics Cloud, which will be further enhanced. Like one example for the techies basically under you, and I think there are quite some, will move away from the so-called private embedded model we have today in SAC when it comes to DWC consumption towards a more public model, which provides us more feature capabilities in the future as well. Then on a more mid to long-term perspective, that planning that we have already in here today in a replication-based manner, we want to basically enhance that and basically provide a live planning for how I would refer to. But I think for the moment, let us now focus on the bidirectional integration. And just to sum up again, the key benefits from what we've seen: we have a superior analytics integration when it comes to the two solutions. We have that planning integration, to which I want to talk now a bit more about. And last but not least, and not mentioned yet, we have actually an SAP Analytics Cloud add-in for Analysis Office. So everyone who likes and loves Excel can actually use Excel with Data Warehouse Cloud in combination and do the analysis also there. Moving into the innovation that we brought, if we go over to the next slide, with our Q3 release is this bidirectional integration, and you see it here pictured quite nicely on the right side. So we have SAC on top with the dashboard, we have Data Warehouse Cloud on the bottom with a modeling environment. And our intention basically for this integration with planning is on the one hand, that you can truly leverage SAP Data Warehouse Cloud as a centralized data warehousing that empowers reporting as well as planning purposes. On the other hand, SAC needs, right at this stage, acquired data to do planning activities, and because it effectively wants to do write backs, you want to enter your budgeting and so on. So we have now that basically arrow from data warehousing to SAP Analytics Cloud, where you can transfer your actual data as a basis for your plan. Once in SAP Analytics Cloud, you can plan on the actuals, copy them, write, and do your budget and forecasting. And once you've achieved that, you can use now an API from SAP Analytics Cloud to transfer the data back to Data Warehouse Cloud, to have basically the planning data as well as the latest actuals in Data Warehouse Cloud combined. So that's a really great enhancement, and we've had many customers already participating in our beta release from Q2, and now also happy to say that basically both APIs are public. Now, looking a bit more in detail into what that means and the architecture of both sides. And here we see on the left side DWC, on the right side SAC. And let's now first focus on the DWC public API. So an API to effectively extract data from Data Warehouse Cloud on the left side and integrate it into SAP Analytics Cloud. So what we do is we can basically speak to the analytical data sets, to the dimensions in DWC, and extract them via the OData connector from SAP Analytics Cloud. We then have the data acquisition framework on top, which allows you to do further data transformations, renamings, and so on. But in the end, with the goal, of course, to integrate the data into your planning model. So an easy way to basically, and easy steps to go from left to right. And vice versa, the process from SAC to DWC is similar. Once you did your budgeting, you can use the CDI connector of SAP Data Warehouse Cloud to connect to the fact model, to the master data in SAC via the data export service. You have then two ways actually of how you want to leverage these or integrate these data models. You can either use a remote table in Data Warehouse Cloud where you need a DP agent at the same time, or you can use our data flow technology to effectively write the plan data into a table in Data Warehouse Cloud. And then, of course, you can do your usual reporting on top of it. And now what we want to do in the course of this session is really a focus on the demo. So we have very pleased actually to have shown with us because he will give us a deep dive into how that data export service works, both like with Postman, but then also in action with a BTP application. And last but not least, we'll have a look into how what I've just showed you, this integration between SAC and DWC actually looks like in practice, and that's something that Max will take over. I would say now over to you, Sean, and excited to see what you can show us on the data export service.
Thank you. So I'll just start with sharing my screen here. So yeah, just a quick slide on the data export service itself. It's a public API available on Cloud Foundry tenants for SAC. It's an OData based API. So that means the REST endpoints are quite structured. You can retrieve both transaction data, or what we call fact data, and also master data out of analytic and planning models. And you're also able to get the metadata for these models. So stuff like, is it going to be a decimal in the target system, or is it a string and such, or a date? And it extracts currently right now from our performance tests roughly 20K rows, 20,000 rows a second. This can vary slightly depending how wide a model is. As you can imagine, if there's a lot of columns, this can go up or down. This is something we're really happy with, this performance. But of course, when we brought it to customers, the first thing they asked us was about Delta support. So nobody wants to do a full Delta or data replication of their model each time. They want to just get the changes. So this is something coming soon in Q4. So I'll kick into the demo for Postman, but just to start, I'll introduce this model. It's a small enough model. It has 500 records. We have a few generic dimensions. We have a date inversion, of course, and this account dimension. This account dimension here has some data access controls, and this will take or be of use later on in the BTP app demo. And I'll just share these DAC controls. So we can see here that this other user, this FBA 139 low priv user, only has read access on gross point of sale revenue expenses and this gross other revenue. Okay, so to start with this Postman demo, I guess I can share how we authenticate ourselves. So if we go to the administration panel and app integration, we can create an OAuth client. I already have one created here. And once you create one, it's quite straightforward. You just need to select this data export service access, and then you can copy the client ID, the secret, and this token URL into Postman. So I've already this prepared here. I have a Postman collection, and just under authorization, I've selected OAuth 2.0. I've put in my access token URL, my client ID, and my secret. So now I should be able to get a new access token. This is a pretty standard OAuth 2 flow. I can hit use token, and now for every request I send to the service, this bearer token will be included in the authorization header. So starting with the first request, I want to show we have, I guess, looking at the URL first, the tenant, followed by API v1 data export, and the first, I guess, interesting endpoint is this administration endpoint. So this administration endpoint just gives you the root of the what we'd call the administration service, and it just lets you know the entity sets available on this side of the service. So the two ones we're really interested in today are namespaces and providers. We're able to get metadata on these two types of entities and entity sets. So we can see a namespace ID here is made up, or namespace is made up of a namespace ID and description, and a provider is made up of a provider ID, a provider name, and namespace ID, a description, and a service URL. And I'll go more into what those are shortly. We can list all the namespaces. So here we just have an SAC namespace, and this just represents basically the collection of models in SAC, as you can think of it. So using this namespace, we can say essentially give me all the models in SAC, and here we call models providers. So we can visit administration, namespaces, and we can pass in this kind of a filter. It's what we call a key predicate to say, give me all the providers with the namespace ID SAC. So I can send this request and I get a huge list of models on the underlying system. So ideally, we probably want to filter this down. The other model I showed a minute ago in SAC itself began with A. So we can pass this $filter, and we can say that the provider name, which corresponds to the model name, starts with A. So here we have the filter, and we can see all the provider names now start with A that are returned. So taking a quick look at this provider again, we have a provider ID. This correlates to a model ID. It's just a unique identifier for the model on the SAC system. We have a provider name, which is the name of the model. We have the namespace ID, which should always be SAC. We have the description, which again is the model name, and then a hyphen, and then the description of the model on SAC. And then we have this service URL. So this service URL brings us to what we call the provider's side of the service. And in this case, it points to this model. So if we visit this URL, I have it prepared here. We can see we get another response similar to the root of the administration response. And this tells us all the entity sets available from this URL onwards, essentially. So we can see we can access fact data, master data, and individual dimension data as well. So if we wanted, again, we can take a look at the metadata by appending $metadata to get the URL. And we'll just let this format nicely for a second. And we can see more interesting information now returned from the API on. If we were consuming this fact data, this is what the primary key of the data would look like. We can see the various types then as well. So here we have the account is a string. In the database, you might store this type, the max length, various things as well. Here, the signed data is a decimal, and similarly for master data, we get metadata as well. So probably the most interesting thing is, of course, the export of data. So here we can export fact data from this structure of URL or appending /fact data from on top of the service URL. And now we get all of our fact data. So if you remember earlier, I noted out that there was 500 records in this model, and we can see at the end here that there's 500 entities returned in this page. Again, we can apply filters on top of the data export. So here I have a filter that says, give me all the data where the account equals gross web revenue, and the signed data is greater than this big value here. And here we can see the accounts all match gross web revenue, and the signed data is bigger than that other value. Again, we don't have the full 500 records, just 14 in this case. In cases where you have really large models with likely millions of rows, we introduce pagination through the idea of page sizes. So you can think of each response returned by a request as a page of data, and you can iterate through these pages. So here I can set a custom page size to limit my response down to 100 entities, and we get this next link. And you can follow this next link, so you can send another request, whatever way you're consuming the API, to this next link again. And you will get the next 100 entities or rows, or however you want to interpret the data. And just to show, if I change this to 400, I shouldn't have another next link because we consumed 100 in the first request and now 400 in this second request. Just to showcase as well, we support other formats. So for data, we support JSON and CSV. And for metadata, we support JSON as well, and also XML, which is the default. So here we have a CSV export of the rows. So this could be just saved straight as a CSV file from the response body and then opened in something like Excel. A nice use case of this as well is if you have a lot of data, the JSON keys can take up a lot of the response. So sometimes it's nice to compress the keys into just these column headers and use the CSV response, which reduces the size of the response body. Finally, as well with Postman, we have the master data here. So similarly as fact data, we take the service URL and we append /master data. And here we'll get all the master data. And similar, if there's a lot of master data, we'll have next links again. You can follow through until there's no more next links, and then you can be sure you got all of master data. So that's everything from the Postman demo. We took a look at, I guess, browsing models, looking at metadata, looking at fact data, looking at how you can filter down models or data itself. There's a lot more you can do with the filters. They're quite powerful, and there's good documentation on the API and how to consume them. We looked at the different output options, whether it's text, CSV, JSON as well, and the export of master data. So I'll kick on over to the BTP application. And I'll just copy this email as a user. So this is a web-based application, and it's kind of an abstraction over the Postman, where Postman's all very technical. We can see the URLs and stuff. This is just a nicer way we like to use to showcase the API and some of its possible usages, just through a nicer UI rather than Postman. So here I can log in via SAC, and previously in Postman, I was basically accessing the API as a technical user, where it didn't care what business user I am. It's just a technical connection, so it could see all of the data. Here I'm going to log in as the limited user we saw earlier in the model. So it has some restrictions. It has some data access controls. So I can browse models here through this nice UI. I'll click in my nice little demo model. So that previous screen, I guess, showed the equivalent of the provider's output we saw earlier with the list of models. This shows me the base, the service URL endpoint here, where I can see my different entity sets. So in this case, I want fact data. Now behind the scenes, it's going to look at what is the metadata for fact data. And then we have a couple options here on the screen. So I can filter by version for my data. So I can put a little filter in here. So if you just wanted your plan data, which is the general use case, you just put in public plan. I can preview my data. So this will get me 100 rows. I can make sure that my filter doesn't have any plan in it. And I can do other things here, like let's say order by date. I can click next, and what this will do is try and retrieve all the data my user can see. So here we can see that I don't see anything for web revenue or expenses. So my data access controls are still working with this user. So I also have the option, I guess, of downloading his CSV. So I can open this up and hopefully if all went well, I should have 300 rows of data. And there it is. Cool. So that's everything I have with the B2B app. I guess to just showcase how you could possibly put a user interface to some degree on top of the data export service API, and just showcasing as well that we have this other business user connection you can use that will adhere to data access controls. Finally, before I pass it back over, I just want to showcase this API Business Hub. So I have to accept all down here. We have the data export API on the API Business Hub. It means you can really easily try it out. So if you just look up data export service API Business Hub, it should come up. You can hit try out. We basically have, to some degree, an integrated Postman in here, where you can add a new environment. You can put in your tenant information. You can create an OAuth client on your tenant and just fill in the information here as well. And then you can start sending similar requests and looking at the output from your system right here in this web application. So I think that's everything I wanted to cover. So I think I can pass it over to you now, Max, for the DWC demo.
Okay, thank you so much, Sean. I guess you can see my screen now. And what Sean has shown you basically was how flexible this API is, how open it really is and generic, and you can use it in any use case that you can imagine, yeah, and build your own stuff on top of it. Now, what we want to take a look at is how we embed this into the overall use case of the bi-directional data flow for planning between SAP Analytics Cloud and Data Warehouse Cloud. And of course, we'll also take a look at the other way around, yeah, how to get data from DWC into SAC. And DWC, I think, is where we have our actual data, yeah, the data that we need as input for our planning processes. And this is also why we are starting here on this Data Warehouse Cloud screen. So I'm going to go into the data builder now, because as I just mentioned, yeah, usually we have our actuals for financial data, for example, in Data Warehouse Cloud. This is also what we see here. So I have a table with my S4 actuals, and I have built a simple view on top. I can open it. I can check the data preview here. Maybe we'll get a glimpse at what kind of data we are actually looking at. Sure, it's not showing anything here at the moment, so it's still loading. Yeah, okay. So sugar expenses, interesting, cash in, okay, milk, energy. So maybe we are looking at something like a food manufacturer or whatever, yeah. And when we see energy here as one of the drivers or one of the accounts that we have in our financial data, yes, probably it's clicking with all of us, right? So energy prices are a big concern at the moment for companies. And this is also actually the trigger for us now to say, okay, we want to have a liquidity forecast. We are worried about the energy expenses and how they might develop in the near and midterm future. And let's see how we can forecast that using SAP Analytics Cloud and feed data into SAP Analytics Cloud from Data Warehouse Cloud. But what's influencing our energy expenses? For sure, probably the energy price, right? Not only probably, for sure, the energy price. And this is why we also want to integrate the energy price as a driver for our future forecast in SAP Analytics Cloud. And the cool thing about Data Warehouse Cloud is that we can use the data marketplace in order to integrate external data, such as influencers or external drivers, into our data set, and then also load it to SAC to do our forecasting on top. So I could go in here now into the data marketplace. I see featured data products that are already available. Also some sample data, global data for COVID-19, which is of course super important driver for many businesses at the moment. But now I want to look for energy prices. And actually, I have set up a simple data model with a kind of technical name because it's just for the sake of this demo and our tech ed session. I will get to that later on, that we will have in a couple of weeks' time. And here I have the energy prices prepared in this data set already. So I see a description of this data product now that I can combine with my existing internal data. So this external data product has the history and forecast for energy prices in a couple of countries: Germany, Switzerland, UK, and the USA. And now I can load this data for free. So in this case, it's free of charge. For some other data products, you are charged a certain amount. And once you load that for free, you get the data into Data Warehouse Cloud. And what I have done is I have built a union combining the existing S4 actual data that we've just seen a minute ago with this external data coming from the data marketplaces. What you see here, the influencer data and the union, and then the final view that I now want to upload into SAP Analytics Cloud. So now we're switching to SAP Analytics Cloud. We are in the connection module. You see down here in the navigation pane. Now I have already created a connection to Data Warehouse Cloud, and we can check that out. So I have one only for the actuals. I have another connection for this union view. And funny that I cannot edit it now, but never mind. What we did in order to create this connection was to create an OData service, and I also saw some questions in the chat if SAC can handle different OData sources. Yeah, so as you see here, this is a generic OData service connection module. In this case, we have entered the data service URL referring to Data Warehouse Cloud, but you can also call other OData service APIs here. So this is not at all limited to the SAP landscape or to Data Warehouse Cloud in particular. What you can do then, based on such a connection, is you can consume it in your planning model. Here we have a quite simple planning model that we want to use to do the liquidity forecast for our company. So you see we have just one measure, which is called amount. We have the liquidity item, which is kind of like our account structure, right? But also includes the influencers, etc. So it's not a clean financial structure. We have a date dimension, a transaction currency dimension, and we have our different company codes. So as you see, quite a simple model. What I can do now is go to the data management tab. And I see that I already have an import job set up, which is based on the union of the actual data and the influencers. So the DWC view that we have put together beforehand. How did I do that? Yeah, you can say import data from file data source. In our case, DWC is a data source. I had used an OData service. I can use the connection here to the union view and create a new query. Okay, I select the view. And here I now have the possibility to select the fields that I want to integrate and upload into SAP Analytics Cloud. I can say create. And now in the next step, I will be able to set up the import and do all the respective mappings of the fields from the union view to the dimensions with their properties and descriptions in SAP Analytics Cloud. So go to Setup Import. I think too many of you are familiar with SAP Analytics Cloud. This is not really new. Yeah, so we are making use, of course, of our standard wrangling interface, where you can now change and transform data from your view, maybe in order to match it with the IDs that you have in your SAC model in the dimensions if they are slightly different. Here I don't have to make any changes. Just go to next. It's asking me to map a time column here. And automatically sets the right format. And then I can go next. I don't have any issues with my data, and I can go save and exit. And finally, I can run the import. I've already done that in our example. And we have the data fully available, as we see here by the status indicators. Import 1 has been already completed successfully. And now I can use this data, of course, in my stories, in my forecasts, in my predictions. This is what we're doing now. So we have a story here, with our liquidity overview, a nice time series chart where we see the cash out related to operating activities, as well, of course, the cash in related to the operating activities, and the influencer data for our cash out is milk price, sugar price, and energy price. As we said earlier, today in the session, we are focusing on the energy price. I have some other charts here as well, which help me with my analysis. But what I now really want to do is go into the planning part. Okay, and now we see a table with the cash flow related data for our different company codes and different currencies. And down here we have influencer data for the energy price. So, I mean, the actuals that we see up here, basically, these are the actuals that we already had in DWC in the very beginning, coming from S4. And down here, we have the data which we added in the data marketplace. And what we now want to do is to run automated prediction in order to create a time series forecast for the year 2022 in this example. So our data is from 2021. And see how our cash is developing with the latest energy price forecast that we got from the data marketplace. We have a multi-action here. A multi-action is an orchestration module in SAP Analytics Cloud where you can chain together different data actions to do data transformations, calculations, but also import jobs, for instance, or also, as we see here, predictive forecasts. So I'm running this predictive forecast now, set it to run in the background. And now let's see what is actually happening under the hood now. For that, I open the predictive scenario. And I have a predictive model, which is currently being trained, and running. And once this is run, we will also see the results. But maybe in the meantime, what we can do is check how we actually set up this predictive scenario, and it's super easy. You really don't have to be a data scientist in order to do so. So we have our data source. That's the model we have seen before in SAC and where we have loaded data into. We say, what's the target for our forecast? So it's the measure amount. And as we said, the account energy expenses. We have to tell the system which time dimension it's supposed to take as the date dimension. The number of forecast periods that we want to create. And we want to slice and dice our automatically generated forecast by the dimensions or entities company code and transaction currencies. And down here, we have added the energy price as an influencer. Okay, but now we can check out what actually happened. So we see for our different entities, how good or how bad the predictive model has performed. We can check out the forecast that has been generated for all the different combinations of company codes and transaction currencies. So staying with Germany and Euro here, we see the actuals for the energy price here, and of course, with the increase that we have seen with the energy prices, also the forecast is adjusted or calculated accordingly by the system, where we see that even nicer is here, so we see that the influencers, they contribute by a percentage value of 10.78% to the overall forecast value. And you very nicely see that with the energy price increase that is expected according to our external data, also the energy expenses that we have to pay as a company, they are going up. I think this data set really nicely also has the spikes that we have seen, unfortunately, in the course of this year. Okay, and so now that this is finished running, yeah, I would also expect that after a refresh here, I have now the energy expenses pre-populated in my new forecast for my cash out related to operating activities. What I can do now, of course, is also play around with these influencer data. So I could add additional 10% for the remainder of the year if I think the energy prices will go further up. So this is not a problem. I can simply rerun the predictive forecast afterwards, and I will get an updated result. Of course, also you can play now with different versions, yeah, and then also have a version comparison, best case, middle case, worst case, whatever. Yeah, you can imagine there. So this is pretty nice. Okay. So in the next step, of course, what we want to do is to bring this data back now, yeah, into Data Warehouse Cloud to feed corporate reporting, plan versus actual comparisons, forecast versus actual comparisons, etc. And this is now where the data export service comes in that Sean has explained to us in depth, right? And I will switch to Data Warehouse Cloud now. And I'm again in my Data Warehouse Cloud space where I had all my actual data, where I integrated the external data as well. And here we have a connection, yeah, to the data export service that I have set up. It's actually quite easy to set that up. Yeah, give it a name. You have the connection details. So that's a URL that is given to you as part of the API documentation. You enter the OAuth token endpoint, which you get from the SAC system. I have opened it here. So you go to administration and app integration. And here you get the token URL, the authorization URL, etc. In order to load to set up the connection to afterwards load your data. That's pretty easy. Yep, I want to leave. And what I have done then is I have built a data flow, which then actually pulls the data from SAC into Data Warehouse Cloud. And it's also pretty easy to be done. You have the connection to SAC now showing up here in your sources. Then you can search for the model, yeah, or the provider name. As Sean has explained to you, we refer to the model as providers in this context. You'd simply then choose whether you want to see fact views or master data views. Then later on, just choose any example now to show you how that looks. And I've pulled that in here. I'd already done so before. You create a table then directly with that, which finally hosts and receives the data, which is triggered by the data flow. Yeah, and then you can run the data flow up here. It's now started. Data Warehouse Cloud has a very nice data integration monitor. And in this data integration monitor, you can see the different runs of the data flow. You see earlier today, I've already done a test run. And yeah, see the different steps, and we see that it has completed successfully. And now, of course, you use this data for downstream processing. Very common use case will be that you add this data, this forecasting data, to your corporate reporting. You create the views, plan and actual in Data Warehouse Cloud, and then you can already, as we learned earlier, do live reporting on top of these views with SAP Analytics Cloud. And in the future, it will be even easier with the analytic model introduction and the seamless integration that we will offer for that from SAC side. Okay, with that, I want to conclude my demo. And there's just 2 or 3 more slides that we want to show to you. And I think these are super interesting because they will cover our future roadmap. Mirko has already alluded to the roadmap earlier on a higher level. So now let's go into a bit more detail. So what we have seen already is that we now have the bi-directional integration between SAC and DWC for planning. We have improved UX and improved time dimension as part of the core integration. And we now also have support for optimized view mode, design mode, and global layer support. So those are recent concrete innovations that we have shipped. In Q4, what you will get is the one data catalog. Yeah, as Mirko has mentioned earlier, in Q1, then very important is that we have the enhanced analytic model integration into SAP Analytics Cloud on the SAC side, and the overall introduction of the analytic model on the DWC side. Then in the future, we want to lift any feature limitations that we may have in the beginning of this model type. We want to make these DWC analytic models really first-class citizens in SAP Analytics Cloud, that they look and feel and have the same capabilities like the models that you create in SAC for the planning purposes then mostly. Yeah? We also have scheduling stories based on DWC models. We have the planning as a service and the data analyzer support coming then in the future. Now, last but not least, I want to highlight that we will also have a TechEd session this year, which goes into way more detail on the use case that we have seen earlier in my demo. So in this TechEd session, you will be advised how to build this end-to-end planning scenario with Data Warehouse Cloud and SAP Analytics Cloud based on existing actual data, adding data from the data marketplace, loading the data into SAC, using it for forecasting. There we will then also, build the stories. We will build the multi-actions to trigger the prediction. We will build the predictions themselves in the predictive scenario section of the product. And then finally, of course, we will also load the data or pull the data into DWC, where you will build connections and the data flows, etc. Okay, with that, I think on behalf of Mirko, Sean, and Vitaly, I would like to thank you for your attention, and maybe we still have some time for questions if there's anything open in the chat.
Yeah, Max here, Mirko speaking. First of all, thanks to you and Sean for the great demos. I think there was one question in the chat which you partly responded to, but I think Jeff reiterated on it. So effectively, he mentioned that in the SAC analytic application, there's an OData kind of connector, right? An option to connect to OData, I think feeds potentially or sources. And he was wondering whether we can use like the SAC export API or the DWC export API to connect directly from this analytical app. So I think my first response would be, and Max, please chime in on it. First of all, I'm wondering on the interest, right, to connect basically via your data to a model that's already located in SAC. So here, I think the most efficient way is to simply connect to that model. It's already part of the file repo. You can directly use it in the analytic application. Now, for the DWC OData API, that's actually something I think which is primarily depending on the authentication mechanism and whether the analytic app supports our OAuth 2.0 authentication code method. So that's something I wouldn't be able to answer right off, but something that we can certainly take. Except Max or Sean, you have more details than I have.
To be honest, no. I think maybe we also have to take the question offline, Jeff, and discuss a bit because I'm not 100% clear on the use case. But I know that we will meet next week. I believe even by coincidence, so maybe we can take it there as well.
So perfect. Then you can take it.
Okay. And then I see a comment from Jeff. He's rather waiting for the replication-free planning to avoid the data import-export. Yeah, agree that replication-free planning will be super cool. And this is also referring to the question from Michal, whether there's a plan to push the planning models down to DWC. Yeah, that's actually, I think, what we refer to as replication-free in this context. And that's what Mirko had on the slide as planning as a service that we start to deliver in 2023. And here we will then you will create a planning model in SAP Analytics Cloud from UI perspective, but actually we will deploy these models then into data warehouse cloud spaces. And this is then really live planning. So whenever you save data in data warehouse cloud, save data in SAP Analytics Cloud, it will be right away available in data warehouse cloud. And there will be no double storage of this data anymore. So this is going to be super exciting. Yeah. Optional, however, yeah. So customers are not forced to buy an additional data warehouse cloud in addition. So you can also just keep using SAP Analytics Cloud like you're used to. Yeah. And then there's also, I see a question connecting to that, whether there's a conversion of existing planning models in SAC to this DWC focused mode then, or to this deployment in DWC. Definitely something that we're working on. We're fully aware that when you want to use the powerful combination of SAP and Analytics Cloud and Data Warehouse Cloud for replication-free planning or planning as a service, you don't want to rebuild all the models that you have built in SAC. Yeah. So me as a product manager, so Mirko, that is something we are heavily pushing to. Then I also see a question whether SAP by design can use this solution. Probably depends on what part of the solution you refer to. Yeah. So our APIs are open. However, not the by design expert. And often, when you consume these open APIs, the complexity does not lie in SAP Analytics Cloud, for instance. The complexity lies then in the consuming system, where you have to set up to call the API. But in principle, I would not exclude that possibility.
Yeah, I can add on this, Max. So that similar questions we receive actually for SAP Data Warehouse Cloud, because also on our end, right, it's an open API. And basically from our side, it's open to be consumed by any application. We had a controlled release in Q2 this year where we simply reduced our use case to SAP Analytics Cloud simply for that bi-directional integration. But now also with Q3, this API is actually open and principally you can connect from anywhere to it. But in practice, it's true that it's not always that simple. So one use case, for example, that I'm looking at is also the consumption of DWC by other, say, third-party BI clients. And that really depends on the connectivity option of those clients and whether they support basically this OData connection, including the authentication type that we offer here. But indeed, I think we have a great base on our end and also look on improving, of course, the API. So whether if they're interesting, say apps where we need to deliver additional functionalities. I think Max mentioned early on, we have a Delta, or Sean mentioned it. We've also a Delta support plan for the SAP Analytics Cloud API. So there's also improvements happening on our end, and I'm happy to receive feedback basically where you guys want to integrate to.
Maybe just add on slightly from data export service on the SAC side. The OData, any OData connector, I guess, that supports OAuth out of the box, you're pretty much guaranteed connection to the API. And we also have cases where there's middleware, so you use some custom code sitting in between the API and another connector that will do some conversion for you, that will allow you to export the information into a different system.
All right, I would say almost time to hand over to you, Vitaly.
Yes, we are at the top of the hour. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise. Thank you for all the great demos that you presented. If any questions are not answered, or if you are watching the recording of this video, then please post your questions at the comments on the event page. and we will make sure that our product experts see them and answer them. And at the end, I just would like to remind that we are going to have one more session today. It is with the guest speaker, James Barlow, who is going to present some fun stuff that he has done with the Analytic Designer in SAP Analytics Cloud. And then later on today, we have the very special session where our SAP CTO and the member of the executive board, Jürgen Müller, joins us to celebrate what makes us developers happy, which is coding, fun, collaboration. So stay tuned. Please join our other sessions. And for now, I would like to thank you once again and say goodbye.